بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله الأمين أما بعد. Alhamdulillah, all praise is due to Allah whose rewards are everlasting. All praise to Allah who guides to the truth and has legislated fasting. And upon His Messenger we ask His salah and His praise, and we ask to remain steadfast until the end of our days. Our topic is our eating habits during the month of Ramadan. And the first thing is that if you ask people what are the benefits of fasting, or if you ask them what is fasting about, the first response you'll get is during fasting there is no eating and no drinking from sunup until sundown. And it's the first thing that you hear from people, and a lot of times that's where it ends, that no eating, no drinking, sunup to sundown. And few people mention other points about fasting. Now we all know the ayat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. That fasting has been prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you may attain taqwa. So the question is, how do you get taqwa, this piety and God consciousness and being aware of the fact that Allah is watching you and the fear of Allah, just by not eating and not drinking, and you get taqwa? How does that happen? And we see many other benefits. The Prophet ﷺ said, "As-siyamu junnah," that Sawm, fasting, is a shield from the hellfire. And the Prophet ﷺ also said, "Man sama Ramadan imanan wa ihtisaban, ghufira lahu ma taqaddama min dhanbihi." Whoever fasts Ramadan with faith or a firm belief and seeking the reward, he will have his previous sins forgiven. So how does all this great benefit come from just staying away from eating and drinking? What happens if someone during the day in Ramadan genuinely forgets and they drink and they eat? What happens? What's the ruling here? They can keep fasting because it's a gift from Allah Azza wa Jal. So they forget during the day in Ramadan, they eat and they drink, and then suddenly they remember. One of our imams was invited to an all-you-can-eat and he forgot he was fasting. So he was absolutely full, and then he remembered that he was fasting. So you can eat and drink by mistake, and your fasting is still valid. That means there's something else that happens also besides just abstaining from eating and drinking. We see a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that كل عمل ابن آدم يضاعف الحسنة بعشر أمثالها إلى 700 ضعفا. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying that every good deed of the son of Adam is multiplied in reward from 10 to 700 times, except for fasting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِلَّا الصَّوْمَ فَإِنَّهُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ. That except for fasting, for it is for me, and I will grant a reward for it. Then Allah describes, He leaves, meaning the servant, his passion and his food for my sake. So that means we put the food and the drink aside for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so that we can also free ourselves to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, most people, as we said, most people just worry about what goes inside their mouth, and they're not worried about what comes out of their mouth. And we know that the Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ لَمْ يَدَعْ قَوْلَ الزُّورِ وَالْعَمَلْ بِهِ فَلَيْسَ لِلَّهِ حَاجَةٌ في أن يدع طعامه وشرابه. That whoever does not abstain from deceitful speech, like from lying and these actions, Allah is not in need of him leaving his food and his drink. And we mentioned this hadith in the khutbah. So people then, they worry about what goes into their mouth. Like someone will worry after wudu, they'll spit 100 times to make sure that not a droplet of water goes into their throat. But then they don't mind backbiting and lying and saying things that are haram, all while they're fasting, but they spit 1,000,000 times to make sure not a drop of water, not a droplet of water. And as a note here, the scholar said that is not necessary to do that, to make sure that there's nothing absolutely left in your mouth. So the point is then, we put the food and the drink aside for the sake of Allah, and then we free up ourselves to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But unfortunately what happens is that we put our food and our drink aside, and then we spend our time and our effort in preparing for the time to eat. I call it the countdown to iftar. So we wake up, 10 hours to iftar. After, only 5 hours to iftar. Half an hour, I'm going to destroy and ravish the food. Countdown. The whole point was we will leave the food aside so we can focus on worship. But we leave the food aside and we focus on, okay, what else can I include with the meal today? What can we do for the food? So maybe then the problem is eating and how we regard eating. Because as you've all heard, that many people now, they live to eat and they do not eat to live. If people eat to live, that means they have other concerns in their life and they just do this act of eating just so they can remain alive and can sustain themselves. While other people, and this is the majority of people unfortunately, they live to eat. And they live to try different kinds of gourmet. Oh yes, I've tried Chinese food, I've tried Thai food, have you tried Pakistani food? Let's try this kind of food. Let's go to this exotic restaurant today. People just live to experience these different types of food. And the problem is the way we eat. So we eat to celebrate. If we want to celebrate, there has to be food. Well, everyone has food in their home, and they're not hungry and they're not starving, but we have to eat if there's a celebration. To socialize, we eat. We want to get to know someone, why don't we have dinner sometime? Okay. And if there's a prize, we give someone a coupon or a ticket to go to some kind of restaurant and eat again, because we're rewarding him, even though that person's fridge is full of food. And we eat to honor people. So I want to honor someone, I bring them to my house and I make lots and lots of food for that person. So as the poet said, to be respected by people and praised and not damned, offer a roasted camel stuffed with 2 lambs. And to be considered generous and not poverty-stricken, make sure the 2 lambs are stuffed with chicken. And to be further respected and even loved if you wish, make sure that the chicken is stuffed with fish. And to make it a great experience and make everything nice, surround the whole mixture with mounds of rice. This is generally how we regard the issue. But let's look at how we're supposed to be eating. The Prophet ﷺ, first of all, how many of us have heard of the hadith of filling a third with food and a third with water and a third with air? We've all heard. How many people can quote the beginning of the hadith? You know, because this part, this is the extreme. This is, if there's no other way, this is the maximum that we can do. But we quote this hadith as if this is the minimum, that you fill with a third with food and a third with, or perhaps we fill a third with food and a third with dessert, and then a third with water and whatever we can fill with grapes, whatever can fill the gap after that. The beginning of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, مَا مَلَأَ ابْنُ آدَمْ وِعَاءً شَرًّا مِنْ بَطْنِهِ, that the son of Adam has not ever filled a vessel worse than his stomach. So the worst thing you can fill to the max is your stomach. This is the beginning of the hadith. Then it continues, بِحَسْبِ ابْنِ آدَمْ لُقَيْمَاتٍ يُقِمْنَ صُلْبَهِ. So sufficient for the son of Adam are a few bites to sustain him. A few bites to sustain the person, this is sufficient. And then the Prophet ﷺ says, فَإِنْ كَانَ لَا مَحَالَةً, so if there is no other way and you have to, فَثُلُثٌ لِطَعَامِهِ وَثُلُثٌ لِشَرَابِهِ وَثُلُثٌ لِنَفْسِهِ. If there is no way and you have to, then a third for your food, then a third for your drink, and a third for your air, or so you can breathe. So this is how it's supposed to be. This is the maximum that you're allowed. If there's no other way and you have to do it, then you fill a third. But the way we look at it, it's the minimum. The minimum is, mashallah, the brother, mashallah, he follows the hadith, he fills only a third of his stomach. But no, this is the maximum that you're allowed. So now the minimum, of course, is the maximum, and the maximum is when we're an inch away from exploding, and that's how it has become. And most people can't stop if they're not full to the brim. And you find them dissatisfied and their faces are sour. I didn't get full all the way, I still have this much left. And they're looking frantically, searching for something to stuff that little gap so they have no way to breathe after that. So because of this, it's important for us to see the relationship between eating and worship and obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You'll be surprised that you find a link between eating and patience and obedience and worship and memory and knowledge and iman. One of the wise men that I met, he was telling me that one of the ways he finds if people, he recognizes if someone is patient or impatient, he says when people sit to dine or to eat, and then they're waiting for other people to show up. He says, I know the person who is impatient because he can't wait for everyone to show up. So he starts to break a little bit off a piece of bread. Then he starts to find some kind of sauce he can dip that bread in and put it in their mouth. Or maybe grab a few raisins from the mountain of rice, because they don't have this patience. So they start nibbling before people show up. And this is one of the things in fasting, we learn this kind of patience. And we're going to get into that inshallah. And it teaches us also fasting. When we don't eat during the days and we're fasting, teaches us obedience of Allah. And we'll get into how it facilitates worship. The early Muslims used to say, al-bitna, that which goes into the stomach, al-bitna tudhibu al-fitna, which goes into the stomach, makes like your intelligence and the wisdom go away. And how is that? Also we find, if you read books about raising your iman or how to maintain your level of iman, you find they list the things that increase your iman and things that lower or decrease your iman. And amongst the things that decrease, they list eating too much. And I remember one time I went to an all-you-can-eat, and I ate so much, and then we went to just Maghrib prayer in the masjid, and it was like Taraweeh for me. It was very, very long, because you're full and you can't breathe and you're sleepy. And this is how it is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-A'raf, يا بني آدم خذوا زينتكم عند كل مسجد وكلوا واشربوا ولا تسرفوا إنه لا يحب المسرفين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the translation, O children of Adam, take your adornment, meaning your clean clothing to prayer, and eat and drink, but waste not by extravagance. Certainly Allah does not like al-musrifun, those who are wasteful or extravagant. Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah comments on this ayah. And he says, and whoever leaves that, it is extreme, and both of those prevent health and bring illness. What he's talking about, he's saying that whoever leaves the advice of this ayah, because in the ayah Allah says, and eat and drink. If you don't eat and drink, and you go to an extreme where you're close to starvation constantly, he says that this brings, it prevents good health and it brings illness. And then he says the other extreme also, eating and drinking in extravagance, it also prevents good health and it brings illness. This is Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah. He continues saying, by that I mean not eating and drinking or in excess, or excess in that, like eating and drinking in excess. All of preserving your health is in these few divine words. This is his comment on the ayah. He says good health is in just this short ayah, that you should eat and drink but not in excess. So the question is then, food is supposed to make us well, it's supposed to make us healthy. So then why is it that now people become sick from food? How is that? How is it that Allah Azza wa Jal created something intended for it to give us health and to make us healthy, and yet now people are getting sick from something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made for that reason? So there could be a couple of answers to that. One thing, it could be because of how we eat, because we're not eating as it was intended by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're supposed to eat a little bit, or as we saw in the hadith, but now we eat so much. And if you look at the books of nutritionists and others, they always mention too much of any food and too much of any substance is bad for you. And the problem is we eat too much, so we get a lot of every substance in our body. And the other thing could be what we eat, and that could be one of the main reasons or the problems. And the thing about that is, I've been warned many times not to ever mention these topics of the hormones in the meat and the chemicals in the vegetables, and I find people who are very much afraid that I'll ever mention these things in front of them. Why? Because they'll feel I'll become a barrier between them and beloved meat and chicken and the good stuff. So they tell them, don't mention these things. I would rather keep eating it. I don't care what poisons and hormones are in it. I'd rather enjoy these things. Please don't mention these. Because you know how they say, and I'm not saying the brothers are ignorant, but they say ignorance is bliss. You're happy as long as you don't know about these things. So this is another problem, and without going into what's in our food, I will just leave you with this, that to the food industry, we are nothing but guinea pigs. All they care about is how to make $1. And all the laws are on their side. As much as there are some regulations by the government, big industry always has the upper hand in the end. So we're nothing but guinea pigs in the sight of the food industry. They put some chemicals and they put things in the food and hormones that they know have adverse effects on human beings, but they don't care about that. Even things that are unnecessary. But I'm not going to get into the details of that. Unless someone wants, they can approach me later. So then, concerning Ramadan and eating, the issue has been reversed. Just as many things concerning Ramadan have been reversed. For example, our time in Ramadan. This is just 30 days out of the entire year. We're supposed to focus and spend the majority of our time in worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah could have chosen half the year for worship. He just gave us 30 days to spend our time and to spend most of it in worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal. But look at how our time is used now in Ramadan. And to a lot of people, Ramadan is a time when you're not eating and you're not drinking, so you make sure that you spend it in semi-hibernation, that you don't go out in the sun, that you stay at home, watch television, and you find Muslim countries, they cater to this need. You find in Muslim countries the best television programs are during the month of Ramadan. Why? Because the people are fasting and they have to be at home and they have to be entertained, because it's a very difficult process of not eating and drinking for a few hours. So you find in Ramadan the best TV shows and many different series, and people getting time off from work to go worship Allah, time off from work to go and sit at home within the air conditioning and so on, so they do not suffer any during the fasting. So the question is, what type of sin will be expiated or forgiven from this type of fasting? And as we said, the benefits of fasting is that it's an avenue to taqwa, and Allah mentions taqwa in the ayah of fasting. And there are many ways through which we get this taqwa. One of the things is, if you can stop yourself from doing that which is halal, then no doubt you can stop yourself from doing that which is haram. If I can have enough control to stop myself from eating and drinking, and that's halal for me, then no doubt I have enough in me to stop myself from doing something that's haram. And as you know, eating and drinking, they're essential to your survival. I mean, if you do not drink for 3 days, you'll die, and if you do not eat for 30 to 40 days, you'll die. So these things are essential to your survival, and you stop yourself from doing them. So what about other things that you don't need to survive? Like lying and stealing and backbiting and talking about this person and what they have done, and all these news updates. All that is unnecessary. So that means surely we have enough to stop ourselves from doing these things. If we can stop ourselves from the halal, we can definitely stop the haram. Other links between our fasting and how we're supposed to benefit, we find that if the stomach is hungry, the scholars say if the stomach is hungry, other parts are full. Your other body parts are full. And if the stomach is full, the other body parts are hungry. What does that mean? When your stomach is full, your other body parts, they're hungry now. So when someone's stomach is full, their eyes are hungry, their ears are hungry, their private parts are hungry, their tongue is hungry. So you don't find a hungry person bothered or worried about what this person is wearing today and occupying their time about talking about other people, because their stomach is hungry and they don't have time to occupy themselves with these other things. But when your stomach is full, now you're free to do other things, and your other limbs, now they want to enjoy themselves because hunger is out of the way now. So fasting defeats the shaitan in that it removes lusts and desires from the human being. And that's why when someone is fasting, they don't typically fall into many sins when they're fasting, because the stomach is hungry. And of the benefits, obviously, and this is of the more popular benefits of fasting, is that when you're fasting you can taste hunger, and then now you know how the other people, the poor people, feel. And they say hearing is not the same as feeling it. They say that the rider does not feel the pain of the one who is walking unless he gets down and he starts to walk. So we get to know how the poor people feel. Maybe they feel this all year long and we only feel it for a few hours. And also among the bad habits that have evolved during the month of Ramadan is that we care too much about eating. We care so much about eating. The main concern becomes the meal of the day, the chef's special, the most important issues of the day. So we've started to prepare for Ramadan with a diversity of foods and drinks and some fantastic and exotic foods that only surface during Ramadan. So now we and our kids look forward to Ramadan. Oh, Ramadan's coming, we're going to eat that kind of food during Ramadan. Foods that only show up during Ramadan. And when it's time for Maghrib, then people start to eat like they've been starving. So they eat here and they drink from there and grab food from everywhere until they start to sweat and gasp for air, and that complicates worship, but they don't care. So you look at the huge shopping list for the month of Ramadan. We want to ensure that there's a different kind of soup every day, and we go into a state of emergency. We have to have this kind of meat, that type of salad, this type of soup, appetizers, desserts, fruit, rice and bread, and even different kinds of bread, and then more meat. And people spend more money. Statistics from Muslim countries show that people spend during the month of Ramadan 3 times as much on food as any other month. Can you imagine that? People spend 3 times as much as food in Ramadan, more than the other months. Even though the stomach is the same, and the meal now, instead of 3 meals, you're having 1 or 2 at the most. And people still gain weight in Ramadan. So what does that tell you about the intensity of these 1 or 2 meals? Some people who gain weight during the month of Ramadan. So people eat like they're making up for lost time. They eat like they're making up for all the time they couldn't eat during the day. And for that reason, eating becomes so important to us during this month. So I thought we agreed earlier that the whole idea was to put our food and drink aside for the sake of Allah, and so that we can also free ourselves to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So during the day there's no eating, but we're thinking of when it comes time to eat, and we're doing the countdown to iftar. And then when it's time for iftar, we eat so much that we cannot go and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in the television programs in Ramadan, they have a lot of cooking shows. In the magazines for women, there are many different recipes and many things like that. So people spend a lot of their time, and there are actually some real magazines, it's not a joke. In the magazines they're giving real sincere advice on how to move and at what pace to move during Ramadan so you don't starve. They tell you after Fajr, most people, they run out of the masjid, they're ignorant. You get up slowly. And so we'll look at some, as we go, some of possible cures for these situations, especially with our mothers and our sisters. One of the things that the scholars give advice is, don't shop when you're hungry for Ramadan. Shop at night. Because some people, they go shopping while they're fasting. So they become very creative and they think that they can eat everything. And they shop and they bring food in excess. So the scholars say shop at night, so you've got your mental faculties back and you can think straight and you're logical. And you buy enough food and you don't buy things excessively. And this is not how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had intended our eating. وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا. Eat and drink and do not be wasteful or do not exceed in that. So I'd like to look at some historical examples of eating. Perhaps we're not as bad as these examples, but they're humorous. For that sake we'll look at them. It was said that a wandering man, a man that was traveling, he came to the house of a hermit or someone that was living alone, and the man, the host, he wanted to be nice to him because he's traveling, so he wanted to offer him some food. So he brings him 4 loaves of bread and he tells him, wait, I'm going to go get you some lentils, some dal. Okay? So then when he goes to get the lentils, he comes back and he finds that the man has eaten the 4 loaves of bread. So he leaves the lentils there and he goes to bring him the bread. When he comes back, the man has eaten the lentils. So he goes back to get him more lentils and he comes back, the man has finished the bread. And they say that this goes on around 10 times. So then he asks the man, he says, where's your destination? He has to travel. And the man tells him that he is going to Jordan, the area of Jordan, because he heard of a very skillful doctor there that would cure his stomach because he was suffering from the lack of appetite. So then the man asked him, I'll ask you a favor, and the traveler said, sure. He says, if you find that doctor and your stomach is cured, please don't come by this route when you're on your way back home. It is also said that there was a wandering Arab, a Bedouin Arab, and he attended the dining table of a Khalifa, one of the Khulafa. And then they served a roasted goat. And the man started rushing at it and devouring it very greedily, until the Khalifa tells him, you eat of it as if its mother had butted you. So he's telling him, as if the mother of this goat hit you with its horns, you're so mad you're getting revenge in the way you're tearing away at this goat. And then the man quickly responded to the Khalifa, and you have pity on it as if its mother had suckled you. So another, Al-Shamardal his name, and he narrates about Sulaiman ibn Abdul Malik, who was one of the Khulafa. He was the Khalifa right before Umar ibn Abdul Aziz radiallahu anhu. And Sulaiman ibn Abdul Malik was known for having a voracious appetite. And if you find books about him, you'll always find a mention of his appetite. So this man Al-Shamardal rahimahullah, he narrates saying that when Sulaiman ibn Abdul Malik visited the city of Al-Ta'if, he accompanied with Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. He was accompanied with Umar, and he came to me and he said, oh Shamardal, what have you got for me to eat? And I said, I have a fat goat for you. So he says he urged me to bring it, and I did. And he said the goat was as if it were butter. It was so soft and tender, the meat. So he says he sat on eating from it without inviting Umar ibn Abdul Aziz until he devoured all of it except for one leg. Then when he had one leg left, he turned to Umar and he said, come on, O Abu Ja'far. And Umar said that he was fasting. So then Sulaiman ate the leg, and then he looked at me and said, woe to you, Shamardal, haven't you got anything else? And I answered, I have 6 chickens as if they are the thighs of an ostrich. So he says, bring them to me. And I brought them to him, and he ate all of them. And then he asked me if I had anything else, and I told him that I had porridge that looked like gold flakes, and I brought it to him, and he swallowed it all. And then he says that he asked his servant, he called his servant and asked if he had prepared the lunch for them. So this is like almost an appetizer. And the servant answered in the affirmative, and he asked what it was, and the servant said, I have a couple of pots. And then he says, bring them to me just one by one. And he says the servant would bring some pots with bread, and Sulaiman would eat about a third of each one until he finished all of them. And then he wiped his hand and he lay in his bed. And then he says later on the attendants called, and they came in and the table was spread, and he sat down to eat with the people again. So I'm sure we're not all to this level, but these are just humorous examples. To us, these examples are humorous because they ate so much, but perhaps the way we eat so much would be appalling to the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, because we eat so much in comparison to what they're used to. Another incident tells you, and this shows how people used to, how viciously they wanted to eat. A Bedouin Arab ordered his sons to buy some meat for him. So they brought him the meat and they cooked it until it was done. So then he starts to eat of all the meat, and then he was full and he left a little bit of meat and some bones. So now all his sons were looking at him expectantly. They wanted that the rest would go to them. So then he says, now he is a wise man, he wants to see which is the most deserving of his sons to get this meat. So he says, I'll give it to none of you except the one who would eat it properly. So then the first son said, I will chew it until no particle finds home therein. And then he tells him, it is not yours, it's not for you. And then the next son said, I will chew it until it looks as if one whole year has passed since it was eaten. So this is strong intention here. And the father tells him, it's not for you. And then the third son says that I will pulverize it and make its marrow as condiment. And then the father said at last, it's yours. So I'm sure that we don't eat to this degree, but we still eat so much that we need things after eating. We need something to aid in digestion. After a bout of great ingestion, a cup of tea to aid digestion, the action takes place in the non-smoking section, but who's paying the bill is the bigger question. This is how we eat. We need something to help with digestion. After that, we need sodas, we need antacids, we need medication for indigestion, we need gas X, we need Beano, all these things to help people with their digestion. Now let's look at how some of the early Muslims used to regard eating. And we find that first of all, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrates that the Prophet ﷺ, he never spoke bad about a food. If he liked it, he would eat it, and if he disliked it, he would leave it. And the thing is, many of us know this hadith, that the Prophet ﷺ never spoke badly about any food. He would leave it if he didn't like it, and if he liked it, he would eat from it. And yet so many people, they're so vocal when it comes to talking about food that they don't like, and when comparing its taste to other things, and insulting the food. And perhaps there might be someone who enjoys the food, and at the same time this is a blessing from Allah Azza wa Jal, this food. And people who don't have that, so we're sitting and we start to insult, oh, I hate this and I hate that. And one should keep this aside. And perhaps this is one of the reasons, because fathers and husbands complain so much if there's anything wrong with the food, that now our mothers are forced to spend so much time in the kitchen to make sure that the husband doesn't complain about the food. And he shouldn't be complaining anyways. If he doesn't like it, he doesn't eat it, and he stays quiet and he eats from what he likes. And also Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu relates that the Prophet ﷺ said that the meal for 2 people suffices 3, and the meal for 3 suffices 4. This is how it should be. If there's food for 2 people, they've prepared 2, that's enough for them, and the 3rd person comes, it's enough for all 3. And the same for 3 if there's a 4th person. And if you look at it now, the orders that we get when we go to restaurants, they're not for one. Realistically, if we want to eat like the sunnah, many people can eat from that one plate. But if we want to go to the maximum of the sunnah and fill a 3rd, 2 people should eat from one plate. And you go to a kebab place, they give you so much rice and so much meat and so much bread and salad with it, and some of that the little good stuff, the sauce on the side. And then sometimes I go to these places with brothers, or before when I used to eat meat, and brothers would say, this place, the serving is so small, and there's like a huge piece of bread, it's like huge, like the size of a clown shoe, and the brothers complaining there's not enough food there. And I made a deal with one of my friends in our kebab eating days. I told him, let's just get one plate and we'll eat it together. And we did it the first time, and the second time he said, get your own plate. I need my own plate. We eat so much and we're used to that. So let's look at Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. He used to, for a while, when Medina was struck with famine, he swore that he will eat nothing but oil and bread. So he doesn't want to be the greedy Khalifa who's eating roasted goats while everyone else is starving. So he said he's not going to eat anything but bread and oil until the starvation is lifted, or the famine is lifted. So he eats just bread and oil. And it is said from the people who would be at his gathering that they would be sitting with him and his stomach would rumble. And then he would speak to his stomach and he would tell it, you have nothing with us except for bread and oil. Can you imagine, especially someone in a place of power, living on something such as bread and oil? And as I say many times, if we ever tried this, 3 days we're going to start to bite our brothers and bite our sisters, because we need meat. So one day, and the bread, as you know, back then they would get like the wheat or the grain, and then they would grind it. And of course it was a strenuous job to grind it. If you want to make it very fine, you would have to spend a lot of time grinding that flour or the wheat. So his bread, the bread that he used to eat, was very coarse. So it had like bits of wheat in it, and you know they are very hard when you're eating that. So he used to eat such rough bread with oil. So one day a man visits him, and he tells him, Umar radiallahu anhu tells him, why don't you eat with me? And the man says no. He saw that the food was too rough, so he says, no, inshallah, later on I'm going to the people of so and so, and I'll have some of their food, and the bread is finer and the food is a little bit better than this. So then Umar radiallahu anhu shows him 2 things. He shows him, 1, I know about good food, and 2, I am capable of having good food. He tells him, do you see me not capable of ordering a young goat, look at the choice, a young goat, and then have its hair removed, just the hair, not the skin, and then let it roast over a gentle flame for many hours so that it becomes soft like butter, and then order bread to be ground very nice and very fine, and then nice bread to be made from that, or order that the wheat be ground very finely, and then nice bread to be made from that, and then I would order them to remove the skin from the goat, and I would order them to take some raisins and put it in water so that it becomes red like the blood of a deer, and then I will eat from this and I will drink from that. So he's showing him that I have the ability to do that, and I also know very well about good gourmet and good food, but I choose to eat this. And look at this quote from Umar radiallahu anhu. He used to say, woe to the one whose stomach takes him to the hellfire. What does that mean? He looked at it like that you can survive on anything. The believer can survive on any kind of food. It can be coarse bread and oil. So why would you ever let your stomach, because of something haram that you ate, take you to the hellfire while you could have lived on anything? So he used to say, radiallahu anhu, woe to the one whose stomach takes him to the hellfire. Now, the act of eating too much, it goes against many things in Islam. For one, it goes against the ayah that we mentioned. One of the early Muslims said that Allah had put all of medicine in half an ayah, and then he recited this ayah, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا. He's saying that Allah put half of medicine, meaning your health and the key to being healthy, in just half an ayah, and then he recites this ayah. And eating too much goes also against the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ, as we saw in the hadith, that one is to eat little or enough to sustain a person. And we find people, because they eat so much, they're not able to stand in Taraweeh, and they're not able to make sujood, and they're barely able to speak. And I know many people don't like to mention things like this, but we suffer from the burping. And we stand there, the person next to you burps, and you know what they had for dinner. And they burp, and you know that they had nothing but a plate of garlic for dinner. And this becomes a distraction to you. And we know very well, every one of us knows the hadith, that you're not supposed to eat anything with a foul odor like garlic or onion before going to the masjid. And people now can't focus on their salah because now they have to hold their breath until this passes over. So these are all problems that happen because of eating too much. Not to mention the fact that the person himself who overeats is not able to worship Allah as energetically had they not eaten too much. So we find if you eat too much, one of the things, you become sleepy. A lot of people, right after the all you can eat, they want to go straight to bed after the buffet. Why is that? There are many reasons behind it. One of them is that your blood pressure drops. And because your blood pressure drops, because now all the focus and the concentration has to be around the stomach where all the action is. So because of that, you feel lightheaded a little, and you think that you're sleepy, while realistically your blood pressure has dropped a little. So you feel sleepy and you want to go straight to bed. And at the same time, there are certain things. If, for example, too much sugar goes into the blood, then insulin comes into the blood. And then insulin causes other chemicals to come, and these other chemicals give you this feeling of fatigue and being sleepy. Doctors will tell you that it takes 22 minutes for your brain to realize how much food is in your stomach. You've all heard this, right? And for this reason, if you're eating and then you go to the phone and you stay on the phone for a few minutes, for 10-15 minutes, and you come back, you don't feel like eating anymore, you feel full. A lot of you have experienced this, right? Why is it that you feel full? Because now your brain has caught up with how much is in your stomach, and now you feel that you're full. So one of the keys is to eat slowly, because when we eat quickly, if I get so full, and then after eating quickly and eating so much, then I start to realize I'm full. By the time the brain realizes how much is in the stomach, you're only this far away from exploding. So they tell you eat slowly. Scholars who say eat slowly. The Prophet ﷺ would eat slowly. And now there is an invention or a contraption. You put something in your mouth. I forgot what the name of it is. You put something in your mouth, and it can affect your speech slightly. And then they say you can learn to speak with it, but you only put it in your mouth at the time of eating, and it only allows you to chew at a certain speed and to eat so much. So what is this when I need now to put something in my mouth to control how much I eat? And do I not have enough control where I can just stop myself from eating too much? Why do I need to put a contraption in my mouth to stop or to limit my eating? Why do I need to staple my stomach? Usually it's the animals who are the ones who don't have control. And the difference between human beings and animals, among the differences, is that human beings have self-control. Animals have no control. Ever see an animal that was hungry and then saw food and said, I'll wait till later? They eat immediately. They're impulsive like that. And sadly, sometimes in school they teach us that the only difference between humans and animals, they tell you that man is an animal, but the only difference is the opposable thumb. We have an opposable thumb, and that's the difference between us and them. We can use tools in them. That's a physical difference. The real difference is that we have control. We can control ourselves. So we look how the Prophet ﷺ, after breaking his fast, he would eat just a few dates before going to the masjid for salah. So he'd go to the masjid with just a few dates and some water in his stomach, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the scholars also comment on the dates that when you eat a few dates, it fills you more than the physical space that 2 dates take up. So you go to the salah and you're not absolutely famished, and at the same time you are not stuffed. So the problem is we go to the salah and we're so stuffed with food. And I was in a masjid one time and someone who was so stuffed that he was moving very carefully and very slowly, and at the same time when he still made his sujood, all the food exited. So one of the things, we don't want to eat too much at the time of iftar. We said that when the stomach is hungry, the other parts are full, and when the stomach is full, the other parts become hungry. But people, after iftar, they become so full, other parts become hungry. And that's why if you compare the deeds, the actions of the people during the night of Ramadan, you see that they sin typically more during the night than they do during the day. Why? Because the stomach is full. Now you're looking for other activity and other excitement and other action. One of the benefits that we lose if we eat too much is we also lose this ability to control our desire and to control our self, our nafs. Because when your nafs or yourself is hungry, it stays away from the bad deeds. It has no power and no strength for desires. And this is the essence of fasting, is that it weakens the desires. And the desires are an avenue that the shaitan leads people with to evil deeds. So we are supposed to realistically eat the same way that we eat before Ramadan, or at least in the same capacity. But people insist to fill to the max, and in that way they lose the lessons of self-control and persistence, or self-control that they're supposed to learn during the month of Ramadan. So we mentioned that hunger makes us feel pity, and it makes the rich feel pity for the poor, and it makes them feel also this equality. So one of the early Muslims was asked, why was fasting legislated? And he said, so that the rich can feel the hunger and not forget the poor. But brothers and sisters, we need to act on this. It can't just be that we know this is one of the reasons and that's it, and we don't act on it. We find of the early Muslims, Abdullah ibn Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhuma, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and many others, they would give their food at the time of iftar to a poor person. If a poor person comes near the house, they give the food that they had for iftar. What does this mean? It's not like they have a fridge where there's more food that's prepared. Because of the lack of fridges, people typically, they prepared enough food for that one meal, because the rest couldn't go in the freezer. So some of the early Muslims would give the food that's prepared in front of them. This is what they're going to eat for iftar, and they would give it to the poor and stay the night hungry. Because the question is, how do we feel hungry? How do we feel the hunger of the poor when we stuff ourselves at night? So it's just a temporary starvation, and then we make up for it when it's time for Maghrib. We see how the Sahaba used to feel the pain of others. Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu, at the time of iftar, they brought him 2 kinds of food. This is Abdurrahman ibn Auf, the companion radiallahu anhu. It's time for iftar, they put 2 kinds of food in front of him, he begins to cry. So they asked him, why are you crying? He said, I remembered Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu anhu. Mus'ab ibn Umair, before accepting Islam, he used to be known as one of the most wealthy and luxurious and best dressed and most spoiled of the young men in Mecca. He always had on the best clothing, the best oils, and after Islam, his mother starves him and she sends him out of the house, and he lives in poverty after that, One day he appears upon the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and they looked at him and they looked down and they started to shed tears. Why? They're used to him being so well dressed and so good looking, and now they see him, he's so poor. All of it because he said, Allah is my Lord. So Abdurrahman ibn Auf cries and he says, I remembered Mus'ab ibn Umair, who died when he died, and we did not find anything to cover him with except a cloth. If we covered his head, his feet would show, and if we covered his feet, his head would show. So he's saying this is one of the great Muslims who sacrificed so much for Allah, and when he died, there was not enough, not even a cloth to cover all of his body. And then look what he says, and he says, and now we eat from all these different kinds of foods, and I fear that Allah has given us the good in this life. So what is he saying? He's saying that this is the poverty back then, and now Allah is giving us all these different kinds of foods. And how many did we say they put in front of him? 2, and he cries. So he's saying that I'm afraid that Allah is giving us the good in this world, and there's no good for us in the hereafter. And this is just from his taqwa radiallahu anhu. So radiallahu anhu, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, he cries because they put 2 different kinds of food in front of him. And what if he sees the average table today, sometimes up to 8 or 9 different types of food with varying colors and textures and odors, and no one sheds a tear. So the reality is those who grow up in luxury never taste the hunger and the pain, and they don't know what others feel of pain and hunger. So the question is, why is it that we do not feel the pain of Muslims who pick up grains? They follow these trucks that bring them aid, or they follow whatever is left over in the market, and they pick up from the ground the grains, just gather them up and then go and boil them and eat that. Why is it that we don't feel their pain and the pain of other Muslims who go and dig up the burrows of the ants to take what the ants have gathered over the years, and they boil that and they eat that?